In an earlier movie, we saw that the New Document dialog box lets you set your margins and column guides. But what if you change your mind later after the file is already created? Or what if you want different margins in different parts of your document? No problem. That's where the Margins and Columns feature comes in, here under the Layout menu. But before you choose this feature, you need to tell InDesign which pages you want to affect. To do that, I'm going to go to the Pages panel over here in the dock. Right now, I can see that I'm looking at pages 24 and 25, and I can tell that because those are the pages that are highlighted down here. That's not necessarily the pages that are selected. For example, I can click on page 21 up here, and now I'm looking at pages 24 and 25, but I've selected page 21. So if I go to Margins and Columns, it will affect page 21, not the ones I'm looking at. So you have to be a little careful there. In this case, I do want to affect the pages I'm looking at, so I'm going to click on these numbers beneath the spread. That's just a shortcut for selecting both pages in the spread. And now I'm going to go to Layout menu and choose Margins and Columns. It's a good idea to turn on the Preview checkbox in this dialog box. That way you can see what you're doing while you're working before you click OK. Now, I'd like to change the bottom margin, but before I do that, I want to ensure that this button, this little link icon, is turned off. It's broken. If this button is turned on, if it's connected, then any change I make will affect all of the fields in this dialog box. I don't want that. I only want to change the bottom margin here. I'll change it to 80 points. Now, it only updates when I leave this field, so I'll press the Tab key to jump to the next item, and we can see that because the Preview checkbox was turned on, the margins moved. I'll do the same thing with the columns. I'll change this from 1 column to 2 column just by clicking that little up arrow. And you can see that now we have 2 columns on every page. Now, obviously, this only changed the margins and columns. It did not affect the objects on the page. If I want to affect the objects on the page, then I need to turn on Enable Layout Adjustment. That's the on-off switch for move my objects or don't move my objects. I'm going to set this back to the way it was, with 60 points margin and 1 column, and I'll turn on Enable Layout Adjustment, and we can see how this works. First, I'll go change my bottom margin. I'll bring that up to 80 points. And you can see that immediately this frame, this text frame, and this image moved, but this image over here did not move. What's the difference? Well, Layout Adjustment works by looking at any objects that are touching guides that move. It has to be touching a guide or very, very close to a guide, and then it will move. This image down here was not touching that guide, so it stayed where it was. As you can tell, Layout Adjustment is a great way to move a lot of objects on your page quickly. So if you're changing your page sizes, Layout Adjustment may be just the ticket for you. However, with that power comes great responsibility. Here's what I mean. Sometimes Layout Adjustment can really mess up your page a lot. For example, if I change the number of columns here to 2, wow, that's not what I wanted and certainly not what I expected. It added the second columns, but it moved a lot of these objects around, and it changed even the number of columns in those text frames. So in this case, I'm not going to want to do that. I'm going to want to hit Cancel and go back to the way it was. So we've seen how we can change the margins and columns on a single spread, but what if we want to change them for all the pages at the same time? No problem. Then we have to use master pages. I'm going to be talking about master pages in the next chapter, but for now, suffice it to say that all of these pages in my document are based on a master which lives up here at the top of the Pages panel. So if I click on the name of the master or choose the pages over here, then if I make a change to that, it will affect all my pages. I clicked on a master. I can go to Layout, Margins and Columns, and once again, I'll simply change the bottom margin to 80 points. And when I click OK, you'll see that the margins change. It changed on every page in this document that is based on that master, not just the ones that I'm looking at. Now remember, these margin guides are just that. They're guidelines for where you might put objects. There are other kinds of guides in InDesign too, including page guides, which is what I'll talk about in the next movie.